be very careful with multitasking. If you really get out of the flow, you might actually need 20 minutes to get into the
Back
flow.
into the flow.
Yeah.
People out there saying that our attention spans decrease since the area of the smartphone. Would you agree with this?
This is no. This is definitely not true.
Dr. Ilyas Lichter, a neuroscience expert, the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Brains First.
We created a set of 4 games that measure your executive functions. You play fun games, we collect relevant brain information, and we link your brain to the job Excel.
Is it actually true that people who experience ADHD do have trouble with focusing their attention on anything?
We tend to talk about the negative aspects of ADHD mostly,
Yeah.
while in fact they can go for 16 hours straight, much longer than other people.
Wow. Is there a life hack, let's say on a very busy day, how we can really make sure we're keeping up our focus?
The most stupid thing to do to me is to having like hours of meetings in the morning. Your conscious mind is already gone home for the rest of the day.
There are some jobs that especially require to juggle a lot of tasks simultaneously.
I would disagree there. I think
Hi everyone and welcome to our Neurolympics podcast, brought to you by Brains First, the company that helps you make better talent decisions, powered by neuroscience. I'm Lucy, the host for your Neurolympic episode, where we believe that every brain's got talent. In our first 2 episodes, we dived into how our brains can have certain preferences over others. And these nuanced differences in our cognitive skills, or what we call executive functions, they actually make up, for a large extent, how you perceive the outside world, how you think about what you perceive, how you act, how you also react towards your environments. With our Neurolympics games that you can play today if you visit our website, we actually measure these executive functions, summarized in 6 core natural skills. The natural skills that we're looking at are how you perceive the world, so how you take in information, how you process these information, how you then eventually think about these information, how you make decisions, how you plan, a very important function of the brain that also helps towards goal-directed behavior, how you act, how you execute. For every month now, we're going to take one of these core natural skills as our overarching topic for a month. And today we start by looking at how we're perceiving the world, how we're observing the world, how we're attending to the world. So the theme of this month is attention. And today we invited our co-founder, our neuroscience expert, to speak on our episode, Ilyas Lichter. So Ilya, thank you once again for coming on our episode and actually speaking about a topic that's really your, well, let's say, field of expertise, right? You've done many years of research also into the topic of attention and gained a lot of valuable insights. So I'm more than excited to have you share your insights on our episode today.
Thanks for having me.
And before we get straight into the conversation, let's get the brains warmed up. So
Good.
Just as every Olympian, we're gonna, on our Neurolympics podcast, start with a little warm-up phase to get the brain cells going. So to ease you into the episode, I've prepared a few statements that I would like you to finish with one or a few words, and also some statements where you need to make a quick decision.
Oh.
Yeah? Are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
What gets me into the focus in the morning is
Actually playing a game of chess.
a game of
Yeah.
chess, really? Okay, I love that. Right in the morning after
Right
you...
in the morning. Yeah.
Okay, for how long is that?
It's just a very quick game online, 5 minutes or so.
Okay, nice. Second one, the biggest distraction in my daily life is...
Well, I think my phone is probably also my biggest distraction, besides having the kids around, of course. So that's the biggest distraction that you can have.
All right. A word to describe my focus style is...
I would say I'm laser focused. So
Ooh.
once I get to it, I don't hear anything. I don't see anything except the things that I'm working on.
I like
Yeah.
that. One fascinating fact I've learned from many years of studying attention as a scientist is...
Well, that attention actually is multiple different things at the same time. And I think when we think of attention, it's not just how talking about focus, but it's also about moving attention. It's also about automatic attention. There's many different aspects to attention. So in that sense, it's important to know about that.
Amazing. We're going to dive into it in a second. Then two more. Isolated office room or co-working space?
Difficult decision for me. I think I can work in both.
Yeah.
Once I think I would actually go for the open office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last one, tunnel vision or everything in sight?
Definitely tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Nice. I hope is the brain warmed up a little bit?
A bit.
A bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Enough to go into the first section actually of our podcast that I would like to call Inside Your Brain.
Mm-hmm.
Sight spelled as SIGHT, so little word game here. And in this episode, we want you to lay a firm foundation of how attention works before we go into the challenges that might arise with our attention, and also going into how we can, improve our attention and improve optimal performance. So let's dive into it. Every day, we are confronted with a ton of information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are perceiving the world by our five senses, ideally, our brain tries to then form this coherent image of the world, which then also makes up for an experience, a conscious experience, which is, I think, quite striking. But the first question, Ilya, for you is, what is attention in a neuroscientific manner, and how do we distinguish between two attentional systems in the brain?
So I think if you think of attention, it's basically a filter on the world. I think we actually are bombarded with information. So you need to be selective in what information to think of, to decide on, to actually use. So attention is, in some sense, a filter or maybe a gateway towards your conscious awareness. And I think that's how you would describe it. Most academics actually talk about a gateway or a filter into conscious awareness.
Yeah, which is also quite cool, because I think when we intuitively in daily life speak about attention, it's really, we think it is already what is our consciousness, right?
Yeah.
What we attend to, I think we intuitively think is what we're conscious of. But no, it actually happens a step before. It kind of filters what we attend to, then becomes conscious, right?
Right.
It's really, I think, good to know and striking. But yeah, what are the two attentional systems? Maybe we can start with what we call system one.
So I think it's important to think of attention as two things. So there's if you're walking around in the environment, some things might be life-threatening, right? So we have this very fast unconscious system that Daniel Kahneman would probably refer to as system one. And that basically, if you see something that is threatening to you, it draws attention to it. So we have this very fast, unconscious kind of bottom-up, stimulus-driven, environmentally driven system. And at the other side, we have the more conscious kind of system. The top-down voluntary system. So you are in control where you actually attend to. And these two processes always work in parallel.
Yeah. And what's quite striking, right, is that I think you told me this earlier, like 95 to 98% of our attention actually happens in the system one kind of way, is, so to say, subconsciously happening. So, and maybe we can talk a little bit about how, since we have to filter a lot of attention and we simply cannot attend to everything, right? Because then our brains would just be overwhelmed. So we're filtering out some information, there's some what we call processing advantages. So maybe this can be explained by the brains being attuned to certain information over others, or some information enjoying like a processing advantage, like a priority to be attended to. What are some of the things that would capture our attention like very quickly?
So I think if we're talking about this kind of stimulus-driven attention system, this bottom-up kind of attention system, it's basically if we're thinking about, say, facial features, eyes, mouth, that's the things that automatically capture our attention. So when we see somebody's face, for example, on a website, you immediately look at the eyes and the mouth without actually deciding this in a conscious way. So that's one of the key features. If you have a very loud noise, for example, or highly contrasting colors, then that would also attract attention automatically. Or a fast motion, for example. So all of these key features that are really striking in terms of sensory input, that's what would draw attention automatically.
It's also called the salience effect, right?
Yeah.
So something that's also very just sticks out, or is maybe also surprising, I think captures our attention. Also, we talk about, well, this evolutionary advantage of threatening information capturing our attention
Indeed.
very quickly, right? And then I think it's also interesting that faces or eyes and mouth area would capture our attention. I think this is for a social aspect.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. These are biologically important stimuli to attend to. So we're social beings. So our automatic attention system is basically really focused on these aspects, and of course, if we're talking about threatening animals, for example, they tend to capture attention as well.
Yeah. And then we have what you already touched upon, the system 2 thinking. So the more voluntary attention, the more where we can actually manipulate attention. So let's speak a little bit about this, because this is also what we eventually measure with the Neurolympics, right?
Indeed. So if we're talking about this intentional system, you are in control. It actually has severe capacity limits. So if you attend to one thing and you decide to read a book, for example, you focus all your attention to the book. You can also split attention into multiple different spotlights of attention, but it becomes very inefficient rapidly. So you can split your attention maybe into 3 to 4 different spotlights, and that's about the capacity limit. So you can only process up to 4 pieces of information up to the conscious level by splitting your attentional focus. So it's very, very capacity limited, and it's also quite slow. So you typically, it takes about a fifth to a quarter of a second before you can actually direct attention in a conscious way. And before that, like the initial, like 1/5 to a fourth of a second, that's where it's the domain of the automatic attention system.
Maybe we can explain an example, or take an example here from a, let's say, work setting.
Yeah.
If you say we can attend to 4 things kind of at the same time, what would that mean in a work setting? Because it sounds really limiting, and I'm just wondering if we're then or if we are very prone to being overloaded in the work settings nowadays.
So, like, take for example, you're working with maybe 2 screens and some notes to decide to actually integrate that. Maybe a book, maybe having a conversation with somebody else at the same time. There you already get into troubles of overloading your attentional capacity limits. So in that sense, you tend to forget things, or you might actually become slower in processing all the information. So to limit kind of the number of inputs that you're facing, that would be optimal. I think that's in a work setting. Like if you walk through a city, for example, there's lots of people around you, and there you actually are overloaded almost immediately. So
Yeah.
you really need to focus on, well, you need to decide what to focus on, but lots of
Yeah.
it will miss your conscious awareness because it basically overflows the capacity limits of your attention.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point to make here, because I wanted to ask the question, how trustable are the observations of our environment? And I think one point to make here is, well, a lot of information just really go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And I don't think we are really aware of this, because I mean, we're only aware of what actually enters our conscious mind. So, but maybe also the phenomenon or the concept of attentional blink fits in here right well. So our attention actually blinks sometimes, and this
like
is
an eye blink, yeah.
like an eye blink. So when we focus on one thing very heavily, and one stimulus, and then a second stimulus or event would appear right after this, it might be that it goes unnoticed, right? And maybe we can take a workplace example that, maybe you're sitting at the desk and you get a very important incoming email from a client. And you're so focused on it that the 5 seconds after, when I am sending you an email, that's also quite important, it might go unnoticed and you might forget to respond to me, right? So this is where performance can also suffer.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Yeah.
I think if your mind is actively processing information, so your attention is fully absorbed with processing that information. It's the center of the stage in your mind's eye, so to say. Then there's no capacity of accepting new incoming information. So in some sense, the gate is closed, the attention gate is closed, so it cannot enter conscious awareness at that stage. Yeah. So that could definitely happen. So if you're working on, for example, answering an email, you're fully focused. Well, maybe this is a bad example, answering an email. But if then somebody asks you a question at that very moment, you might not fully process the information that you need to take into account to answer the question. And then maybe your system one, your unconscious system, your automatic system is able to formulate an answer to the question. But it's if you later ask what did we discuss? You probably didn't store it in your memory for the longer term.
Yeah, and maybe we can take a second here to also address neurodiversity. So I think one disorder that we commonly that goes along with attention deficit is ADHD, right? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And is it actually true that people who experience ADHD do have trouble with focusing their attention on anything? Because this is kind of what I feel like the perception that we have of what ADHD is.
So let me start by saying that people differ a lot from each other, right? So if we're talking about attention, and in this case, attention deficits, including hyperactivity, I'm not the true expert on that, but everything is on a spectrum. And if you actually have severe problems with attention at one end of the spectrum, then, what does it actually look like here, right? If we're talking about neurodiversity. So the key thing that is striking is that we tend to talk about the negative aspects of ADHD mostly, or ADD, while in fact, if people are very motivated, for example, playing a computer game or being fully absorbed in something that they really like to do at work, for example, you don't see it. They can go for 16 hours straight, much longer than other people.
Wow.
I think the key part here is that if they are not motivated, then you see these attention deficits, and especially at school, for example, when it's not really engaging enough. Then you see these attention deficits surface. But I think it's more or less a motivation problem here.
there's this attentional blink hypothesis that I find quite interesting. And again, hypothesis means we cannot say this is happening for sure. It's just an idea that's being tested. That people suffering from ADHD, they might get so overly focused on one thing that they actually really enjoy. So they can have this hyper focus that they experience more attentional blinks. So other events slipping their attention. But I think there's some beauty in this. And also, as you say, that we only kind of look at the dark sides, but there's a beauty of, for example, ADHD here. You can focus very well on things that you really enjoy. And this is also, I think, a key strength.
Sure.
So,
And I think in some sense, what I know about ADHD, typically you see motivational problems in some cases. If it's too boring, there's no motivation to keep your focus.
Yeah.
And at the other side, typically you see some working memory deficits. And working memory is basically the director of your mind. So you decide what to focus on. That happens in your mind's eye. Working memory is responsible for that. And then you actually become more sensitive to the environment or say these motivational states of what is important to you.
Yeah.
So I could imagine that this could be an explanation, but I think it would be better, I think, to focus on the bright sides of ADHD, this kind of hyper focus and really going on, being able to go on for hours and hours straight.
Yeah, I love this. And so we still spoke about how trustable the observations of our environment are, and we just said it's a lot of information go unnoticed. And another thing is that we see the world through a filter, right?
Yeah.
And I just would like to make this point that attention is universal. So we are experiencing some universal effects that we just touched upon, but it's not very objective, right? It's pretty subjective, and it depends on our experiences, how our brains are wired, and in that sense is kind of also personal and can differ between you and me. So I can have a very different perception of, let's say, sitting here talking in the podcast now than you have. And I think that's important to notice.
Well, take the example as if you have a phobia for spiders, for example, it will it will strongly attract your attentional focus, and for somebody else not, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah. Exactly. Also linked to your fears and emotions. Yeah. I think this is a good point to actually speak about how, well, when we measure on the Neurolympics the 6 core natural skills, we get an outcome on a dimension, right? So we can all differ on if we take attention. And on the one hand, our attention can be very, what we call directive, and on the other hand, very perceptive, right? And we're somewhere on the spectrum, leaning more towards one end or more towards the middle. What do we mean by we're observing the world more in a directive versus perceptive way?
Right. So the key things, we measured many different aspects of attention in our games. So one of the things that we are measuring is how well can you keep your focus or your concentration span? How fast can you move your attention around in an intentional way? Can you easily disengage your attention if you like so? And do you have control over your attentional system? And also, like, how easy can I distract? Are you getting distracted by specific information? So there's many different aspects of attention that we measure. On the directive side, I would talk about like people that are suffer very little from, say, internal distractions, your mind floating off, time traveling into time and space to somewhere else. And directive people actually don't have that much. If they decide to focus on something for a stretch of time, they are in control, they stay in control, they keep their focus. So that's one part, not in an indefinite way, but some people can actually focus for 90 minutes straight, while other people have very serious problems even when you go past the 5 minute time limit.
Yeah.
So directive people are actually good at that. So they don't have a lot of internal distraction. They are in control over their attention.
Yeah.
And then there's also the I would call that external distraction. So things happening in your surroundings, well, like that, or somebody in an open office talking to another colleague of yours, or when sitting in the train, are you being distracted by the people around you? Some people can actually close themselves off quite well. So typically these directive people are good at suppressing. So that's the tunnel vision or the tunnel focus.
That you
you
have.
literally become deaf and blind for your surroundings. And finally, I think what also relates to the directive side is the ability to get into the flow. And typically, if we are going to switch tasks or multitask in some way, it actually is very bad for your attention to multitask. But directive people typically need a bit of more time to get into the flow. So multitasking really hurts.
Okay, so perceptive people get quicker into the flow?
Quicker in the flow.
Yeah.
And they are also quite easily distracted by things in their environment. But if it's very quiet, for example, sitting in your home office, then they distract themselves all the time. So it's... and the perceptive people, I think the good thing there is that they are actually quite receptive or perceptive of everything that happens in their environment. So you would definitely want a receptionist or a police officer to be on the perceptive side of things.
Or a bartender, as we spoke
Yeah.
about in our last episode.
Yeah. If you're too directive, you won't notice somebody wanting to order a drink. Yeah.
And I think this is a good moment to actually transition into the next section of our episode that I would like to call brainstorms. So metaphorically speaking, I would like to brainstorm or discuss the storms, the challenges that can arise with our attentional system. Because I think this is very important to talk about on a Neurolympic podcast if we want to make sure we get the best out of our performances, our productivity, our well-being. So let's turn to the challenges that also, I would say, link to the workplace and also to athletic performance or settings.
Yeah.
Where do directive and perceptive people struggle with if we take workplace examples and maybe also athletic examples?
So on the directive side, where people have a strong attentional focus, where there's a lack of distractibility from the environment, they actually sometimes come across as not so social in the workplace because they really get into this kind of tunnel focus. And if you literally ask them a question, they might not even hear it. Or if there's some kind of casual conversation between colleagues going on, they miss it entirely because they're so engaged with their work at that moment. And this is something that you need to be, you need to take care of that in a more explicit way than people that are more on the perceptive side, because they basically, they process that information in a conscious way. So you need to make time for that. So that's, I think, one of the key things for the directive side. Plan your social moments explicitly. And also tell people, like, if you ask me, like I'm truly on the directive side myself. If somebody asks me a question, like, can you please do this and that for me while I'm working on a specific task, I might actually say yes, I might actually answer, but I don't have any recollection of that later on. So if you ask me to do something, I will never
forget it,
never come true. So that's like, so pop me an email, for example. That's then a reminder of something that I agreed upon. But I agreed with my system one, so my unconscious system. So that's, I think, one of the things to advise people on the directive side. And please be very careful with multitasking. If you really get out of the flow, you might actually need 20 minutes to get into the
Back
flow.
into the flow.
Yeah, you're kind of resistant to distractions, but if you are absorbed by distractions, it hurts a lot. So yeah, I think that's one thing on that side. On the perceptive side, it's all about managing your attention and managing your environment carefully. So most people remember sitting at their home office during the lockdowns during COVID, right? And then some people actually, their mind drifts off immediately. So it's too quiet. And then you actually need to add some stimuli. So you need to add music or listen to music, or maybe have Netflix on repeat or something like that. You actually need to add some stimuli. But it shouldn't grab too much of attention. It's just there to suppress your own mind wandering off. And in an open office, of course, like if you know this is a distracting situation, you can come to agreements with your colleagues, like a no talking policy, for example, in the office, a no walking around policy in the office, I don't know.
Very
or
advisable.
actually deciding like this is the moment where I need to sit in a cubicle, or actually need a day of working at home to actually get work done.
Yeah. And I think this is really good that we speak about this, because a trend that's been happening for the past years, I would say, is really towards these open office environments, right?
Yeah.
It's cool, it's fun. And also this agile way of working. So bringing together different teams and kind of make them collaborate. However, certain jobs require certain cognitive strengths, right? And so it's more likely that you might find these directive type of people in one job and these perceptive people in another kind of job.
Well,
and so
that would be the ideal situation.
This would be ideal situation, true. And then it can be really, maybe painful for some of them, these open office environments and this agile way of working, while being very boosting productivity for others. But I think, again, here it's important to say, know yourself and know what your people on which spectrum side they are, to also manage your environments well, right?
Yeah, but I think I do want to say something about open offices. Like in terms of money, right? If everybody has their own office, it will cost a bit more money. But in general, you have severe productivity costs. So actually, if you would have the ideal office for you and for all your people in an organization, it might be 5% extra costs, but productivity probably goes up by 20 to 30% at least. So in that sense, you will immediately earn it back. So this is what I would call, and sorry for saying it this boldly, a stupid decision to actually go for cost saving on office space, while in fact you will lose lots of productivity.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you for pointing this out. And what are challenges that are linked to the capacity limits of attention in the workplace, or also athletic performance?
Right. So I think it's all about there's always more information available in your surroundings than you can take in. So if you're observing, like say on the football pitch, there's lots of things going on, right?
Yeah.
So you need to stick with certain strategies, some routines that you really practiced, and really focus on that, the strategic aspect. So then you can filter out the important information. So if you actually let it go, let it slip, and don't go for the strategic things that you trained, then you would actually expect errors to occur, especially with football players, for example.
Okay.
So yeah.
And also I think maybe related to the capacity limits is what you already touched upon, the problem of multitasking. There's some jobs that especially require constant switching
Mm-hmm.
between tasks, and maybe also in certain positions require you to juggle a lot of tasks simultaneously or on a day, right?
I would disagree there. I think
Okay.
you do need, well, some jobs actually do require more switching or more multitasking, but the best possible way to work is actually to monotask, do one thing, complete it, and then switch.
Okay.
So if you know, like, you need 20 minutes to complete something, just focus on that. No notifications on your phone, no colleagues tapping on your shoulder. Just complete and then switch afterwards. And
Okay.
that will save a lot of energy. I think if you're thinking about multitasking itself, your mind is at it. You're directing your attention in a conscious way when your mind is at it. And if you switch, you actually need to dump everything that you're doing right now. So dump it from, say, the mental space, the conscious mental space,
Yeah.
load in new information, directing your attention again. So this is lots of effort. And then if you go back to the previous task, you need to do it again. So typically, the more you multitask, the more tired you are at the end of the day. Specifically in the morning, okay, you might be able to pull it off, but late in the afternoon after a day's work, it's almost impossible for most people.
Okay, and then actually linked to this, because I think the multitasking aspect or this constant switching between context and contents is very much linked to our smartphones. I think on an attention episode, we need to address the
definitely
issue of the smartphone generation. There's people out there saying that our attention spans decrease since the area of the smartphone. Would you agree with this, or?
This is no, this is definitely not true.
Let's clarify this.
Let me stay polite here, but this is basically a lie. Like, if you ever heard that, like, our attention is it varies a bit, right? If you like to do something, if you're motivated, then you actually see that you can go on and on and on and keep your focus. Look, for example, at ADHD example. I never saw somebody moving around while playing a video game, right? With people with ADHD only show that in situations where they don't care that much, are not so motivated. So there's nothing wrong in that sense with their attention. It's just the context, the situation that's not great for them at that moment. So and actually, if you look at this, our attentional system, well, it didn't get worse. It's how we deal with our environment and where we allow ourselves to be distracted by, for example, notifications or emails or colleagues that keep pushing you out the flow that you currently have when working. So that's we should be more strict in that sense about allowing us to be distracted.
Yeah. Good point. And talking about distractions, I think what is really interesting is that, well, we said that how distractible you are depends on how much of a perceptive or directive type of attender you are, in a sense. But there is this distinction you could also make for external distractions, that something that pops up is very salient. Let's say a loud noise or a colleague suddenly talking is very distractible.
Definitely.
However, right? That's really grabbing your attention. However, there's also this, what some people might find as very distracting, but others not. If the distraction, in a sense, is very systematic. So, for example, for perceptive people, it might be actually advisable to listen to some sort of music, right? That is somehow, has a constant flow, or I don't know how you might describe this. But for other people, this would be very distractible. And for others, this really gets you into the zone, right?
Well, I think you need to know what works for you, right? And you can easily, like, some people work with music, other people cannot listen to music.
Yeah.
Like I typically advise, like try classical music or techno. If there's some
Nice.
vocals, or somebody singing, or you actually tend to listen to what they're saying, so then it grabs attention again. Or
Yeah.
you could have a playlist that you listen to all the time, so it becomes more of an automatic thing to you. It's just like the purpose here is to suppress your mind drifting off, so keeping at work, and it might actually work to suppress the people around you too. Well, if you're listening to music, that's the distraction, but it's a constant distraction.
Yeah.
And I think that's also one of the things. Like if we're talking again about an open office, for example, if you work in an open office, the larger the open office, the better. The thing is, if you're sitting there with 5 people and occasionally somebody talks or walks around, then you really get distracted. If there's murmur going on the entire time, there's always some kind of buzz around you, you can actually more easily suppress it. So my advice would be no open office or a very large open office.
Yeah. Nice.
Like a cafe, right?
Like a cafe. Yeah, that's optimal. And talking about giving advice, I think let's turn to our last section of this episode before we're going to wrap up, which I would like to call Train the Brain.
Yeah.
So while talking about the challenges now, we already spoke a little bit about how you can also optimize or counteract these challenges. But let's go a little bit more into depth here. Is it actually possible to train your attention style in the sense that you could train to be more of a directive versus a perceptive attentionist, or I don't know, or is this like impossible?
Like there's lots of work on training the mind. Like if you look into these traditional ways of, I would think of meditation, for example. It is possible to train attention. It's possible to train the mind, but it takes a very long time. So typically you will get these effects when you practice for 10,000, maybe 20,000 hours.
Hours.
I thought
on minutes.
Meditation. And then you do see differences. So you see more control over your attentional system. At the same time, does it change your attentional style, so to say? Probably not. It's way more productive to look at the things that are actually distracting you, and to actually find ways to compensate. So if you cannot work in an open office, wear headphones, noise cancelling headphones. Try to introduce some music. Which music actually reduces your distractions or not? In some task where you're really motivated, well, it doesn't really matter where you work. But for our stuff, you might actually need to find a way or to gamify your working life to actually manage. So I think that compensation techniques would be the way, I think the go-to instead of trying to train the mind. Training the mind only works for a couple of percent anyway, and you need to keep training it. So once you stop, you lose it very rapidly.
Which is also the downside. How is that? But in professional sports, if you train something over and over, you become an expert. It's more about that certain techniques or tactics become more automated, right? And here it's kind of what you, let's say, because I did a long jump, triple jump when I was younger. And I would say at some point, everything is very automated. So I don't have to attend to every step I'm making because everything is so in my mind. Like I can just perform on a level where I'm not attending to anything. It just happens.
Yeah, so I think if you really practice something, it becomes, a system one automatic thing, right? Yeah. Like driving your car. You don't have to think about how to control your car anymore once you attain a certain level there. Yeah. So that's the same for sports. And if we're talking about basketball, for example, the dribbling becomes automatic. It frees up the mind to actually implement tactics or strategy. So you would want to focus on things that you can actually automate. In football, that would be the dribbling part, for example, or some kind of ball control techniques. You can automate that. And once you automate that, you free up your attentional system. You free up the mind to implement all the tactics that are needed to win the match.
And I think a very interesting question for people out there might also be, is there something we can do when we're overstimulated? So we are overstimulated in the sense too much is happening, our mind is overwhelmed. Is there something we can do to get us out of this feeling?
Well, I think like learning to drive a car is a very good example, actually, because you're actually overstimulated because there's so many things that you need to learn initially, right? So you need to automatize all these different aspects before it becomes, say, a complete whole. Some kind of new habit or schema in your unconscious mind. You don't have to think about it anymore. Then it's the same as like learning to play an instrument, for example. That's the same. There's lots of information flowing in. There's lots of things to do, to listen. You need to internalize these things in your automatic repertoire. And this is something that you really need your full focus for initially before you actually move it more to the unconscious system. And this kind of overstimulation will definitely lead to less fast, I think slower learning curves. I would expect that.
Okay.
So limit it initially. And learn one thing at a time.
Focus on one thing at a time. That's good. And maybe as a last question, is there, I'm hinting it's not really about training our attentional focus, but is there a life hack, let's say, or a way how we can ensure, let's say, on a very busy day, on a very busy working day, athletic performance day, how we can really make sure we're keeping up our focus?
Well, define busy here, please.
let's say on an individual level.
No, but do you have lots of stuff to do yourself? Or is it a hectic day because all people are walking around, so the environment is busy?
Both.
Right? Both? Okay. So I think if it's hectic, right, take control, make agreements with people around you. When are they allowed to disturb you? When not? I think that's you can actually have pretty good conversations about that with your team, with the people you're working with quite often, to actually have these agreements. When do you allow people to disturb you, and when are you in the zone, in your focus moment, and you actually are doing your best work then? Well, don't disturb somebody then. And I think this is also related to if we're talking about lots of work, you actually need to prioritize what is the most urgent, important stuff to do. And most people actually work best in the morning when your mind is still fresh. So have a dedicated slot in your day from 10 to 12, for example, before lunch. Do the most important, urgent stuff there. And I think that really helps a lot. And then when going for lunch, usually you have the most urgent, important stuff of the day done already by lunch. Unless you're getting disturbed by your colleagues again, or an email, or your phone notifications. So really close yourself off for 2 hours straight.
And it also helps the well-being a little bit if you know by lunchtime, wow, I can already relax because the most important stuff is done.
I think that's
advisable.
The most stupid thing to do to me. And sorry that I'm saying stupid here, but is to having like hours of meetings in the morning. Your
Yeah.
conscious mind is already gone home for the rest of the day before lunch. So really, the urgent, important tasks for the day, you'll not manage to finish them. So don't overload yourself. Do the urgent, important stuff first.
Right in the beginning.
Yeah.
And also, I think maybe I can add from my personal experience, waking up. And this is, I think there's also a neuroscientific point about this. To get sunlight in the morning is, especially when we're doing home office and we're not leaving the house, I think getting some sunlight in, and this can also be on a cloudy day, there's still some sun rays coming through. You might just need to spend a little more time outside, but this is really important, I think. And well, quality of sleep, I think this is pretty,
Definitely
and
very
taking
important.
breaks and
I think that's breaks is one of our life hacks. So if you finished a task, it took you 25 minutes, for example, take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
If you have been writing on a document or a story or whatever, you spend 100 minutes there, take 20 minutes break. And so actually, the longer you work on stretch, the longer the break you need to take. But always, if you switch between different things, like talking about multitasking here, interleave it with a break.
Okay.
Even if it's a tiny break.
Very important. Keep that in mind. Well, I think we're approaching the end of our episode, Ilya, but no Neurolympics podcast would end without having a little cool down. So just as just as every Olympian would stretch their muscles after a heavy workout or a competition, we want to make sure we're preparing the brain cells to go over into a resting state and process today's conversation.
Yeah.
So let's have a little reflection at the end here. What's one key point you would like to set your focus on again for this episode to turn into a take-home message?
Well, stop multitasking now. I think you're really reducing your performance at least by 30%. But in some cases, when it really is the very difficult stuff, the difficult work that you need to do, it can reduce your performance by 80 to 90%. So please, people, listen to me here. Do one thing at a time, one task at a time, and once you complete it, then do something else. And don't let distractions actually get in the way. So manage your focus by not multitasking. Monotask.
Oh my God. What a good way to end our episode, Ilya. Thank you for all your interesting insights into how attention works, into the challenges that arise with our attentional systems due to capacity limits and filtering information, but also what we can do to not ultimately improve our attention, but to minimize distractions and in that way figure out what works best for us. And I think, again, here the important point is there is no right or wrong answer for all of us out here. It's really about your personal right or wrong answer, right? So what works best for you? And this ultimately comes down to getting to know what kind of attention type you have, in what environments work for you and don't work for you, and also for other people around you. So if you are, again, running a business or managing people or working with athletes, you want to ensure that you're meeting their needs, that you're providing for the best environments that allow them to thrive, because you want to reach optimal performance, you want to have well-being in place, optimal productivity. So we want to invite you here, I think, to also play our Neurolympics games that you can book a demo today. You can get in touch with us. Just visit our website, www.brainsfirst.com. And also /podcast. You'll get to our podcast website, newly uploaded out there. So we're very happy about that. And we would love to see you more frequently on the Neurolympics podcast. So please make sure you're subscribing on the platform you're currently tuning in from today. And also follow us on our social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok. We're out there on a daily basis. And we would love to see you also engaged. So please make sure to leave some insights, any questions that you have, maybe remarks, what you would like us to speak about in one of the next episodes. Also some comments, and we would love to get in touch with you. And for the rest, I think we hope that you're leaving us incited with new insights, inspired to get out there, get to know your attention style, and we can't wait to see you on one of our next episodes. So stay tuned and have a good one, everyone. We will see you next time on the Neurolympics podcast. Ciao, ciao.